Welcome back to Tutorial Tidbits and welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth St. Hilaire and this week I'm going to show you how to make some fabulous layered one pull gel prints. So you know I like to work in layers, and most of the time when I demonstrate that we do them one at a time. But this week I'm going to show you how to build up layers on the gel plate first and then pull it all together in one pull print. So if you've got a few minutes, let's go check it out. In this lesson, we're going to cover something that is really a lot of fun, and that is something that I call one pull prints. So just like a ghost print that we allow to dry on the plate and then we pull it with a final layer of paint, we're going to take our time to organize some layers and some patterns onto the plate, and then we're going to let them dry and pull it with one coat of a neutral color. So I like to pull it with a neutral light color so that it doesn't affect the colors that we put on the plate. So for this print, I'm going to use Titan Green Pale. You can also use something like Titan Buff, which is a slightly off-white, or some kind of other neutral, like perhaps a Naples yellow would work. But if you have any yellow or gold in your print, this could kind of absorb it. So it depends on the colors. If you're using dark, vibrant colors, then this would be a good neutral. But if you're using any gold metallic, then this may not be the way to go. Today, I'm going to be using Titan Green Pale. And I'm going to use a color combination that I know works for demonstrating purposes. You can always experiment and try with different color combinations and different neutrals to pull the final print with. Everything that I've learned about gel printing, I've learned by experimenting and making mistakes. So, without further ado, I've got two foam stamps from my designs for joggles. This one is called Seed Pod and this one is called Rocks. So these are two of my favorites that I've designed for joggles, and I think they are my favorites for this application. I've also got my mini ink blender tool with the replaceable domed foam insert. You can also wash these inserts out. You can rinse this and get all the paint out of it under the running water and reuse it several times. And then I've got my Italian wedding stencil design. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and I've got a 5x7 gel plate off to the side that I'm going to use as a palette. I could, of course, use a paint directly on the desk as a palette because it's not going to stick to it, but it's a little easier to clean it up off the plate than the desk. So I'm going to take the Italian wedding stencil and I'm going to choose some of the flowers out of it, and I'm going to choose where I put them on the plate, and I'm going to press Pyro Orange with my mini ink blender tool right through the stencil to transfer that pattern onto the plate. So I'm going to put out a decent amount because it gets absorbed by the foam, and I'm just going to dab it in there. And the nice thing about the domed foam is you don't get any hard edges. There's a flat circular foam, but it tends to give you a hard edge on the flat. On this with the dome, there really is no edge, so it gives you a nice soft reproduction. So for instance, I'm going to come in here and dab the Pyro Orange right through this flower onto the plate. And then I'll curate my design by moving around with this stencil and putting certain flowers in certain places. You want to make sure you get a lot of paint on the blender tool because you don't want your flowers to be too light so that they get absorbed by the final coat. So that's why you do need to put out a decent amount of paint. Okay, so once you've got elements of your stencil on the plate, and I'm not worried that some of them are I got a little overzealous and a little bit of extra paint, because it's okay. If you really wanted to, you could clean this up with a Q-tip, but I think it's just going to add to the excitement. So the next thing I'm going to do is set this aside. I would also take this off and throw it in my warm soapy basin so that can be cleaned before it dries. So the next thing I'm going to do is incorporate the rocks foam stamp with some teal fluid acrylic on the plate. And I'll use my 2-inch sprayer to spread it small, and I'll stamp into the teal. Sometimes it's a little easier to roll it out right onto the stamp. And then I'm going to stamp the teal into some of the open areas where I didn't get flowers. So it's important to leave some open space. Change the angle. Okay, that looks really good. And the next color I'm going to use is, I thought I would use copper, but I think I'm going to use gold so I can bring in some bright yellow sort of tone in there. So I'm going to use the iridescent gold. And I'm going to bring in the rock stamp. And just add a little bit of gold element. Same thing, I'm going to bring some of it off the edges. Okay, so now this is going to be dry enough and ready to put the Titan green pail over the whole thing. And before I do that, I need to have my sheet ready that I'm going to use to pull the print. So I'm using my 9x12 rice paper pad because of that smooth surface pulls the most paint off, and I think this is the most successful paper for this, but you can most certainly try it on some other papers. And I wanted to also mention that 9x12 paper, the very same paper, comes on a roll. I think it's 8 wide by, it's 8 wide by 20 feet. And it is exactly the same paper as this. And if you have a smaller plate, or even with this plate, but if you have the 8x10 plate, you can roll the paper out and just roll it and print and print and print and keep on printing and keep on rolling and printing. So I do love this because you're not looking for your light colored solids. You're not looking for your sheets on your desktop. You're not losing your sheets because you're working on this one roll and you just spread it wide and keep on printing. And it also allows you to make a lot of paper with a little time. So this is exactly the same paper that's on the rice paper pad. Okay, so that's probably enough time now. So I'm going to put the Titan green pail over the top. A decent amount, the same amount that you would to pull any other print. I'm going to take the cool brayer and I'm going to roll this color over the whole plate. Then I'm going to put the smooth side down of the rice paper. Sometimes these prints with so many layers of dried paint take a few minutes to transfer. So I'm going to let this sit for a minute. Not too long, but a little bit longer than I would a regular print. A little bit more pressure, so I can make sure that I pick up all of the 3 layers that I put down and allowed to dry. So let me do a little peek. I still have a little bit that's not transferred. So here you can see that I've now pulled up all of the layers. I've got the gold, I've got the orange, and I've got the teal all in one print. So I thought I would go through the motions of this a second time with a second color combination, maybe something a little darker. So I've got my Rose Madder stencil and the same seed pod and rocks foam stamps and my mini ink blender tool with the dome foam and the 5x7 plate, which I just flipped over. It's still got gold on the back, but I just flipped it over. Okay, so, and I'm going to have my piece of paper ready, my printing rice paper ready to go off to the side. So the first thing I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to work in a little different direction, and I'm going to apply the rocks stamp first. And And I'm going to put that down with, I'm going to work with darker colors. So I'm going to work with a phthalo blue red shade. I'll roll that out with my 2-inch brayer. Get the first layer on there with the brayer and then dip it. And I want to rotate the stamp around when I put it on. It's got a little water in it from having been washed, so that's going to give us an interesting effect. It's causing the paint to bead up a little bit because it's a little wet. So I'm doing a little bit more than I did last time with the stamp. Next, I'm going to go with the copper on the seed pod. So I'm going to make sure I get a cleanup sheet, get that blue off of there. Okay, and then I'm going to put out copper. Okay, and then I'm going to use the rose madder, and I'm going to go through that with something that's also dark but is different than these colors. So I think I'm going to use the quinacridone violet. Okay, so now that this is a lot of darker colors and a little bit heavier coverage than the first time, I think I'm going to pull it manganese blue because that's highly transparent and light and probably would let everything stand up off of it. So let's go with that. This is an experiment. We're going to put that over the top, take the 6-inch brayer, and then we're going to get our smooth side down. So here we've got a beautiful 1-pull print in dark tones, and that manganese blue worked really well because the dark blue and the dark violet are dark enough to stand up off of it, and the copper is light enough to stand up off of it. So there's our second totally different color palette, dark tones of a 1-pull print. Well, that's it from my studio this week. Happy Friday. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on a 1-pull print with 2 color palettes, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week.